Sailing once belonged to the wealthy. Slips cost a fortune, and boats were too heavy for any driveway. In 1969, Frank Butler risked everything to change that. He staked his savings on a radical new sailboat, only to have investors walk away, and his first molds were almost tossed in the trash. His design was mocked, rejected, and nearly vanished before it ever reached the water. Yet what began as a disaster quietly turned into America's greatest sailing success. How did a nearly abandoned hull become the sailboat every family dreamed of owning? The real story starts in an era when ordinary people were never meant to set sail. By the late 1960s, American marinas had become showcases for gleaming hulls and polished teak, but for most families, these boats remained as distant as a luxury car behind showroom glass. The price of admission was steep. Slip fees alone often rivaled or exceeded a family's monthly rent, and that was just the beginning. Boats themselves were massive, built from heavy wood or thick fiberglass, requiring not just a significant purchase, but also a commitment to ongoing maintenance and storage. Few marinas welcomed newcomers without deep pockets, and the idea of taking a boat home was almost unthinkable. Most sailboats demanded permanent moorings, and moving them required cranes and a small crew. There was no culture of trailering, no easy way to keep a boat in the driveway, no quick launch at a local lake. For many, the closest they came to sailing was watching from the dock or flipping through glossy magazine spreads where the world of yachting seemed both glamorous and utterly unattainable. The exclusivity was not accidental. Yacht clubs set the social tone, enforcing waiting lists, dress codes, and a sense of belonging that was as much about status as about sailing. Marina rules and hidden costs, insurance, haul-outs, and seasonal fees quickly added up, making ownership a privilege reserved for the few. Boats required constant care, varnishing decks, scraping hulls, replacing lines. Even a modest cruiser could become a financial sinkhole. The marina culture of the era was built to keep the gates closed. Yet outside the marina gates, American life was shifting. Suburbs stretched outward, highways cut new paths across the country, and families loaded station wagons for summer adventures. Leisure time was growing, and so was the appetite for affordable escapes. Campers and pop-up trailers began appearing in national parks, offering a taste of freedom on land. But the water remained off-limits, a domain guarded by tradition and cost. The technology to change this was only just beginning to surface. New fiberglass production methods hinted at lighter, less expensive boats, but most builders clung to the old ways, wary of change. For the average family, the message was unmistakable. Sailing was not for them. Barriers loomed everywhere: cost, weight, storage, and a culture determined to preserve its exclusivity. Yet one man was about to challenge this norm. Frank Butler stood at the edge of ruin. After years of building boats, he found himself locked out of his own industry by a 2-year non-compete clause. The ink on his deal with Whitaker was barely dry when the doors slammed shut. He could not build the trailerable sailboat he believed in, not legally, not yet. With options vanishing, Butler put his own savings on the line, pouring money into a half-finished factory left behind by failed partners. The risk was total. If this gamble failed, he would lose his house, his shop, and everything he had built for his family. Banks would not touch him. Investors, burned by the boat business reputation for quick failures, refused to lend a dime. Butler had no safety net. Payroll came out of his own pocket. The factory lights stayed on only because he mortgaged his future. Every week brought a new bill, a new threat. There were nights when the thought of walking away must have tempted him, but Butler kept showing up, determined to see the project through. Inside the factory, the pressure mounted. The original molds for the 22-foot hull, expensive, heavy, and built on hope, sat gathering dust. At one point, word spread that they might be scrapped to cut losses. A foreman was reportedly told to get rid of them, but Butler intervened at the last possible moment. He understood that if the molds left the building, the dream was finished. That act, quiet and almost desperate, kept the possibility of the Catalina 22 alive. With every dollar spent, Butler faced the possibility of total collapse. The banks said no. The industry said no. Even his closest advisors questioned the wisdom of pushing forward. But Butler's answer was always the same: keep going. If the boat failed, he lost everything. If it succeeded, it would be because he refused to quit when everyone else walked away. But his most daring idea was still just a sketch. Frank Butler's gamble was not just about money. It was about believing in a boat that looked nothing like the yachts along the marina docks. The Catalina 22 was built around two features most in the industry, called foolish, even reckless. First, the swing keel, a thick, heavy blade of cast iron bolted to a winch inside the cabin. With a turn of the handle, the keel could be cranked down for sailing, giving the boat the deep grip needed to keep it upright in a gust. When it was time to trailer home, the same winch lifted the keel into a slot beneath the hull. Suddenly, a 22-foot sailboat could ride behind a family sedan, slip under low bridges, or launch off a shallow ramp. It was as if someone had invented a sailboat with a folding fin, turning the impossible into a Saturday afternoon errand. But the innovation did not stop there. Above the companionway, Butler added a pop-top roof, hinged, spring-loaded, and simple. At anchor, a quick lift turned the cramped cabin into a space where even tall adults could stand, cook, or change clothes. For families used to ducking under low decks, it felt like a revelation. More headroom meant weekends on the water were no longer an exercise in stooping and squeezing. For the first time, a small sailboat offered the comfort of a backyard camper, but afloat. Yet these breakthroughs came with a price: skepticism. Old guard sailors called the swing keel a liability, warning it might jam or fail in rough water. Magazine editors dismissed the pop-top as a gimmick, a toy for landlubbers. Letters poured in questioning whether a boat this light and this different could possibly be safe. Critics scoffed, and audiences soon would too. Long Beach, 1970. The Catalina 22 sat on its trailer, bright and clean, surrounded by a sea of polished yachts and skeptical faces. Frank Butler and his crew watched as crowds drifted past, barely glancing at the little boat with its pop-top roof and swing keel. Dealers gathered in tight knots, whispering, then shaking their heads. Not a single one stepped forward to write an order. Some openly laughed. A rival builder, passing by, leaned in and said, "You will never sell more than a handful. It is not a real sailboat." The press took notes, but not the kind Butler wanted. Magazine editors scribbled phrases like, "too light for real water" and "toy for beginners." The swing keel, meant to open new waters, drew only suspicion. To the old guard, it was a shortcut, a sign the Catalina 22 did not belong among serious boats. As the hours dragged on, the factory crew's hope drained away. They had poured months into this design, risking paychecks and pride. Now they faced a wall of indifference. By the end of the show, not a single order had been placed. The team packed up in silence, loading the boat back onto its trailer. Some wondered aloud if they should abandon the project altogether or go back to the drawing board. The mood was heavy, the sense of defeat almost physical. For Butler, the humiliation cut deep. His gamble had been met with laughter and rejection. The future of the Catalina 22 and the company itself looked bleak. Yet the story was far from over. On a quiet Saturday morning in the early 1970s, a family station wagon rolled up to a modest California driveway. Behind it, a brand new Catalina 22 gleamed in the sun, still smelling of fresh fiberglass. For the first time, a sailboat did not need a marina slip or a hired crew, just a hitch, a ramp, and a bit of nerve. Kids tumbled out, parents checked the straps, and neighbors wandered over, curious about the little sloop with the odd-shaped keel and the pop-top roof. Within minutes, the boat was unhooked and ready, sitting on its trailer like a camper waiting for adventure. At the lake, the launch ramp became a stage. The family cranked down the swing keel with a few turns of the handle, then eased the Catalina 22 into the water. A push, a splash, and suddenly they were free, sailing where only the wealthy had gone before. The pop-top lifted, turning the cabin into a playroom for the kids and a shaded retreat for tired parents. Sandwiches came out, laughter echoed across the water, and the feeling of summer seemed endless. Stories like these multiplied across the country. Early owners wrote to sailing clubs, describing weekends spent exploring new lakes, towing their boats behind used Fords and Chevys, parking them in driveways and side yards. One father recalled, We would pull up on Friday night, launch in the morning, and by noon, we had the whole lake to ourselves. Another owner remembered teaching his daughter to steer by the feel of the wind, not the rules of the yacht club. The Catalina 22 did not just fit in a garage, it fit into family life. As word spread, ramps filled with these little boats, each one a ticket to freedom. Demand soon outpaced every forecast. Inside the factory, the pace turned feverish. Workers who once worried about empty order books now raced to keep up with a backlog that stretched for months. Each morning, fiberglass fumes hung in the air as hull after hull rolled down the line. By February 1975, the 5,000th Catalina 22 left the shop floor, an unimaginable number for a boat dismissed as a curiosity just 4 years earlier. Frank Butler's promise of a sailboat for regular families had caught fire. Dealers who once refused to stock the 22 now pleaded for more inventory, calling from Michigan, Texas, and the Carolinas, hoping to get even a handful of boats for their lots. The phone rang constantly. A production worker later recalled, "We were building as fast as our hands could move, and it still wasn't enough." External forces pushed the surge higher. In 1973, the oil embargo sent gasoline prices soaring. Suddenly, big yachts and long drives to distant marinas did not make sense. The Catalina 22, light enough to tow behind a family sedan and launch at any lake, became the answer. Sales soared as families traded in larger, costlier boats for the freedom of a trailer sailor. Magazine ads promised no slip fees, no waiting lists, just hitch up and go. But the real magic was in the numbers. The Catalina 22 undercut almost every competitor on price. Lean factory lines, standardized parts, and volume buying kept costs low. Quality held steady, owners reported few problems, and word spread that the boat was both tough and easy to repair. The dealer network expanded coast to coast, fueling a feedback loop. More boats in driveways meant more families sailing, which meant more demand. By the mid-1970s, the Catalina 22 had become a fixture at every launch ramp, every lake, every summer regatta. It was no longer just a boat, it was a movement. Yet, as the production lines hummed and the order sheets filled, new challenges were already gathering on the horizon. But dominance would soon be tested. By the end of the 1980s, the steady hum of Catalina 22 production slowed to a nervous whisper. Sales, once counted in the thousands each year, slipped below 400. The late 80s recession hit hard, tightening wallets and shrinking the pool of new sailors. Dealers who once begged for inventory began dropping the model from their lots. Inside Catalina yachts, meetings grew tense. Executives debated whether to keep building the Catalina 22 or let it fade out quietly. Competitors circled with newer designs, promising more speed and modern comforts. Some on the team argued that the Catalina 22 had become outdated, too heavy for racing, too simple for a changing market. Others feared that ending production would erase decades of loyalty and community. For the first time since its debut, the future of America's most popular sailboat was in doubt. Hope arrived in the form of a redesign. Across the country, battered Catalina 22s still rest on trailers in driveways, waiting for another summer. Some are lovingly restored by owners who remember their first sail as clearly as their first car. Vintage fleets gather at lakes and bays where old hull numbers mix with fresh paint and new sails. At regattas, you will spot 3 generations in one cockpit. Grandparents passing down tricks, parents handling the lines, kids laughing in the cabin. Sailing schools still use the Catalina 22 to teach beginners, drawn by its forgiving nature and simple rig. Online forums buzz with advice on fixing swing keels, sourcing parts, and swapping stories. The boat has become more than a way to reach the water. It is a symbol of possibility, a reminder that adventure does not need a yacht club, just a trailer hitch and a little hope. Imagine if this little boat had never survived. Today, more Catalina 22s sail American waters than any other boat, proof that ordinary ideas can ignite extraordinary change. As younger generations rediscover affordable adventure, the promise of freedom on a trailer hitch endures. In a world chasing the next big thing, sometimes the most lasting revolutions fit quietly in our driveways. What dream could you launch from yours? Share your story below.